this is going to be the second part of our tutorial on making a website. And it's time to add some content. We've got our structure set up here with our CSS folders and images and all that. It's all ready, organized, it's ready to go. We've got our versions set up and assets and all that good stuff. So now we need to actually start creating some content to go on this website. We're going to make our HTML files, we're going to make our CSS. We get some fonts to go in there as well. I'm going to start in Atom and create my index file and my CSS style sheets for this site. I'm just going to use one CSS file for everything because it's going to be pretty small. And I do strongly recommend keeping your CSS separate from your main site. That way you can, or from your HTML, that way you can link your HTML pages, all of them, to one CSS file and have all of your styles controlled in one place. That way you don't keep having to copy and paste it and change in multiple files. So we're just going to do this one style for all of the pages in the site. And so let's start with our HTML. I'm going to give it a doc type declaration. So doc type. I'm just trying to get used to this new keyboard. It's the butterfly keys, and so I'm kind of not really feeling my keys here. So doc type HTML, and then we'll end that. I'm going to go ahead and save it so that my code hinting will work. So right now, Atom doesn't know what type of file it is, so I need to save it to tell it that it's an HTML file. So I'm going to go into Creative Cloud where I've got all of this stuff saved. Right now, it's in here in my example files. And I'm going to save this in the root directory of the site. That's really important that your files, your HTML, is in the root directory of the site. It'll make your linking easier later on, so you only have to type one folder name and then your file name. You don't have to send it back multiple directories. So we're going to put that in the root. It's also really important for your home page to be in the root directory, because if you don't have that index.html file in the root, the browser won't really know what to open first, so it'll just open maybe a directory of everything that's in the site, and you don't want that to happen. So we need to have a file named index.html, and that's going to be our home page. Whatever you want to call it, if it's your portfolio, as in this case, or if you want to call it home, whatever, you can do that in the links, but it has to be named index.html. So we're going to put that into the root directory. Save that there. It looks like Atom crashed on me. Maybe it didn't. Yeah, it's crashing. All right, so let's reopen Atom here. Should bring up the stuff that we had before. Now we got to close all these extra tabs though. All right, so let's try opening this with Atom and see if it's there. Yeah, so we've got our doc type .html. So let's go ahead and close Untitled. We don't need to save those. We're also going to go ahead and create our CSS file. So I'm going to go to File, New, here, let's open. Try that again. File, New, and I'm just going to immediately save this as CSS, and I'm going to put this into the CSS folder. So this doesn't need to be in the root, so I'm going to put this in the CSS folder. Typically with a website, you'll have multiple CSS files. And with this one, I'm just going to have one, but it's good to keep that practice up of keeping your stuff organized. I'm going to call this style.html. Keep in mind whatever your file name is, if you have caps in it, you're going to need to capitalize your links to keep it consistent. So I try to keep stuff all lowercase for the most part. I didn't do that with the images, or some of the images, but try to keep it consistent. That way it's easier for your links. I named this HTML, we want to name this CSS. So and if you don't have the correct extension on the end, then it won't work either, because if it doesn't recognize this as a CSS file, that's not going to work. So this needs to go into CSS and be named stylesheet.css. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and put a comment at the top just to say what it is. We're going to call this the main page, or the main site CSS. This is going to be a little comment just to tell us which CSS file this is, in case we end up with several of them. So main site CSS. Let's go ahead and save this. And now we need to start adding some content, because right now, if I preview this, and go and open it in Firefox, There's not going to be anything there, so we need to start adding some stuff. We need to add a title. We need to add our site structure. And HTML files are very specific in how they need to be structured. You need to have your HTML tag. You need to have a language attribute on that HTML tag to tell it what language it's going to be in. Inside of that, you're going to need to have a head tag and a body tag. The head tag is like machine readable stuff. That's where where I would link the CSS file, for instance, where you might put meta information. Really, just all sorts of stuff that's crucial to running your site. So let's pause this for a second. Elements, we need an HTML tag. Inside that, we need a title or a header tag. Inside that, we need our title. So we're going to start creating some of these tags. Tags in HTML always have, well, for the most part, have an opening tag and a closing tag. You put your attributes on the opening tag, and then the closing tag just ends it. And to make a tag, you use first left angle bracket, then the name of the tag. So in this case, it's going to be HTML, and then right angle bracket. And then to close the tag, and I'm just going to put this on a new line, do / or left angle bracket / same tag name, and then right angle bracket. And then you nest tags within other tags. So the HTML tags will contain the entire website inside there. I'm going to make a head tag. And I'm going to go ahead and add some attributes to this head tag. And actually, I need to add a language attribute here as an attribute to this tag. So attributes on tags follow the syntax. The name of the attribute, in this case it's lang, equals, and then in quotes, put the value that you want to assign to that. In this case, I want to assign English, so I'm going to put EN. You do need to kind of study some of these. These aren't necessarily always the most clear what the attributes are supposed to be or supposed to do. So that's where that W3 Schools website comes in really handy, is finding out what all the attributes do and how to use them. So I've got the head. Let's go ahead and add a title. We'll just call this photography site, travel site. How about that? Travel photo site. There we go. So then we'll close that tag. And I'm going to go ahead and close my head tag. And bring my indents back. I like to indent these over so that I know what is a child of what. And that's actually bring my / to make that closed. Right, that looks almost accurate. If I hadn't forgot my T there. I'm all over the place here with the typing on this keyboard. I like it. I'm still just trying to get used to it, and it's a little bit nutty because I'm not, like, I think I've pressed keys and I actually haven't. All right, so we've got our head tag. Now we need to add our body tag. So the head tag generally holds stuff that needs to be loaded before you actually display the page to your visitor, to your user. So typically it's going to be a lot of machine readable stuff. This title attribute is really kind of the only thing that we see in the head tag, and we only see that on the tab itself. If I save this, and I don't have it open yet, let's right click and open it with our browser. I'm going to be testing this in Firefox first. We see the title here on the tab, but we don't see any of that other stuff that we put in the head. Or see the title rather here in the site that's displayed here in the browser window. So for that, all that stuff is going to go into the body. So don't be confused. The head is not like the head of your website. It's the head of the file, and you can add a header within your body tag later. So we'll be doing that as well. But first I need to add my body tag. So body, and then we'll add our closing tag for the body. I like to go ahead and add my closing tags first just so I don't forget them later. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a pain to sort through it, and remembering to add those closing tags later on sometimes can evade you. So we've got our body tags, and we need to start adding some structure to this. I'm going to be making this into several different sections. We're going to have a navigation at the top. There's a nav bar. We're going to have a header section with a parallax photo in it. We're going to have a content area, which is kind of the body of the the site where the main content goes, and we're also going to have a sticky footer at the bottom. So I'm going to organize these, and I'm also going to comment this up as I go, telling my future self or anybody else who might work on this website what each of these things is. It's good to be in the habit of commenting things, because generally speaking, you're not going to work on a site by yourself. You're going to be working on it with other people, and comments are really crucial to know what the last person did or what something on the site is doing without having to go through and learn somebody else's style of coding things. So we're going to add a comment. Comments in HTML follow this syntax where it's left angle bracket, exclamation point, dash dash. Notice everything else after that now is turned gray because comments aren't red. They aren't parsed out by the browser. So anything that it sees as being contained within that comment area is going to turn gray. So it's not going to be affected. We're going to just call this navbar, and then dash dash, right angle bracket to end the comment. Once I end that comment, you see everything else then lights up again. And I'm going to do this with some IDs and div tags. So I'm going to make a div tag and give it an ID attribute equals, and in quotes, we'll call this navbar. Now, there are IDs and there are classes. You'll see a lot of people use classes. And for the most part, classes are nice because you can reuse them multiple times in a single page. IDs can only be used once, though. I'm going to use IDs in this site because this will probably work well as like a single page, like a scrolling website. And if I want to use my navigation to jump from one section to another, I need to use IDs to do that. I can't jump to a class with an anchor tag, but I can jump to an ID with an anchor tag. So if I know, for instance, like this navbar is not going to exist anywhere else in the site or on this page. It's just going to be in the one place at the top on this page, nowhere else. So I can go ahead and use an ID for this, and then I can use that to jump to it later if I need to. So we'll be using IDs for the sections, and in some cases I'll use classes as well. Inside of this, I'm going to set up my navigation as an unordered list. I'm going to put a UL tag, and inside of that, I'm going to put an LI tag, and inside of that, I'm just going to keep making line breaks here. I'm going to put an anchor tag, so A, and href equals. So href is going to be what links to whatever file we want this to open. In this case, this is going to link back to the home page. So I'm going to start this with index.html. This will let me copy this whole thing later on and make my contact page and my about page, and already have this link that goes back to the home page ready to go. So this is going to go to index.html when I click on it, but the text that I want to display, I don't want to call it index, I actually want to call it portfolio. So the text to display is going to go between your opening and closing anchor tags. We'll call this portfolio. And then I'm going to close my anchor tag. I'm going to close my list item. And then I'm going to close my UL. Did I close my div? I didn't close my div yet, so I'm going to go ahead and close my div tag. So we just go ahead and close all that stuff. Now that that's all closed, it's all sealed up, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate these list items a couple of times to make my other links. I'm going to select all that, hit C, come down here, and just paste it a couple of times. And I can change index here to maybe about. And we'll change portfolio to about, and this one will change to contact, and this one will change to contact. So it displays contact and it links to contact. The only one that's going to be different is it's going to say portfolio but link to index.html. All right, so there's our nav bar. Next, I'm going to need to make my content area. So I need to make my header. So I'm going to make another comment, exclamation point dash dash, and then we'll just call this header dash dash right angle bracket. And let's give it another div tag, ID equals, and we'll call this header, and right angle bracket to close up that opening div tag. In here, I'm going to have one h1 element, h1, and if I can remember what that call to action was. So you've got a little call to action, say get out there. Ooh, yeah, get out there, take photos, exciting. All right, then we'll close up that h1 tag, and then close up that div tag. I may need to add additional divs to this for structure later on, but I'm going to keep it simple to start with. And then let's add another comment. So this is going to be my content area. And in this content area, we're going to have, again, yet another div tag with an ID equals, in quotes, we'll call this content. And again, with your IDs, be careful about your caps as well. Make sure however you capitalize it, you're consistent. I typically do things like this, where if it's 2 words, I will just make the first word lowercase, and any other word after that, I'll just capitalize it, and won't put underscores or anything like that, unless it's like ridiculously long. But try to keep them pretty short, pretty sweet, because you're going to have to type all those again when we go into CSS anyway. So just remember to keep that consistent. If you're doing lowercase, stick with lowercase throughout so you don't have a mess to sort out later. So div ID content in here, I'm going to add another div, and we'll give this a class this time, equals gallery. Now I'm doing a class because I may want to make this like multiple galleries. Maybe I'll have one gallery for portrait work and another gallery for landscapes. I don't know, I just might have a bunch. I can also give this, if I want to be specific, I could give it an ID equals, and we'll call this portrait gallery or something. Actually, I think these are landscapes, so we'll do landscape gallery. So if we need to be specific, we can select it by ID later on. And I'm just going to put some placeholders for now. We'll get into the images here shortly, but I'm just going to put some placeholders for now. So I'm going to put in an anchor. The way we're going to display these is we're going to have it so that when you click on the image, it opens up a larger, like the large high-res version of the image, but we want to have a small image displayed first that loads quickly, and then we can click on that and go to our high-res image. We're not calling up those high-res images and trying to load those all into the main page. We don't want to wait for that to happen, so we're going to load up small images first, and our JavaScript viewer will take care of loading those other larger images in the background later. So we're going to do href equals, and I said I'm going to do placeholders, but let's go ahead and just start with our images. So I've got like 12 different images here, and you can see I've got a bunch of different versions of each. We've got small ones, we've got big ones, and we'll go over how to crop those out here in a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to go in and link the large one. So we'll start with this one here at the top, bagan times 1000.jpg. For your images, stay consistent with the names. What I'm going to be doing is using find replace to change all these names out later. So I want to keep the naming consistent. The way that I've set these all up is the name of the location, and then the resolution, and then the .jpg. They're all JPEGs, and they're all consistent, no spaces or anything, just easy to keep track of. And what I can do then is use find replace to change out just the name. So for bagan, I'll replace bagan with bled, and then I'll replace bled with, or bagan with bus, and I'll replace bagan with girl. And we can just go through with find replace and very quickly swap out all this stuff and put in all the images later. But I'm going to just use bagan here as a placeholder and copy and paste it a bunch of times to make placeholders for my images. So we'll start with bagan times 1000. I'm going to copy that, make sure I have exactly the right name. Again, your names for your links need to be exactly precise. So that's my, if I saying exactly precise, and I changed href to href. So make sure that your attributes are spelled correctly too, or else this stuff won't work. So we're going to have the anchor tag, and just like we did up here, we have the anchor tag telling it where to link to, and then we display something that we can click on. In this case, I use text, but down here, I'm going to display an image that we can click on. So I'm going to use the image tag to bring in the lower res image. Now with image tags, you do need to also have an alt attribute. So alt attributes, if in case the image doesn't load, it'll give some text that says what it was supposed to be. If somebody's using a screen reader, like a blind person is using a screen reader, we use the alt attribute to tell them what they should be seeing, but they can't. So we'll call this bagan, and being consistent with this, I can use find replace to change this out as well. So I'll be changing the anchor, I'll be changing the alternate, the alt attribute, and I'll also be changing the thumbnail. So for each link, you have to type this stuff out 3 times. This can be really tedious if you're not consistent with your naming. With find replace, though, we can save a lot of time doing that. So we've got alt. I'm also going to add an src. So src is kind of going to do a similar job to what href does and link that file in here. So we're going to do src. And I can just paste in the name that I've got already, but this time instead I'm going to call it 300x200. And I know that that's going to link exactly to the smaller version here. If I hit spacebar and preview that, we can see that's the small one. And this, my mouse is working, is the big one. Got all these images off of Pixabay, by the way. Pixabay has some really great free stock that you can use. So Pixabay is a great resource for free stock if you're a student on a budget, like many of my students are. Use photos that you have rights to, stock photography if you have to, but don't use stuff that you don't have rights to. Even for students, I say just make sure that you have a license. Get used to licensing things appropriately, whether or not it falls under kind of academic leeway or not. Just always make sure you have a license to use it. All right, so we've got that. Now an image tag is self-closing, so I'm just going to put / right angle bracket, and then I'm going to go ahead and close my anchor tag. So this should be my image here, and before I copy this a bunch of times, I'm just going to test it to make sure everything's working. So I'm going to hit Command S to save it, and then let's swipe over here, and I'm going to hit Command R to reload this. So now we've got our links up here at the top. I can see this isn't loading the image like it's supposed to, so something is not working quite the way it's supposed to. So we've got our image tag here, src, it's displaying the text background. If I click on it, it is not opening my link correctly. So something is going on where it's not finding it. And the reason it's not finding it is that I did not specify the folder name. So always remember to specify the folder name. This is inside the images folder, and I'm looking for it from the index.html file. So index.html is looking for this Bagan x1000 picture, but if I look around here, say I'm the index.html file, and I look around, there is no Bagan x1000.jpg. It is not here, so I'm not going to be able to find that. You need to tell it, look in images / Bagan x1000.jpg. So you need to specify your links out exactly and give it the exact address that it needs to look for. So images / I'm just going to copy that and paste it onto the src attribute. We don't need to add that to alt, but we do need it on src. I'm going to hit Command S and save it. And then let's preview this. And now that should be working, and it should, when I click on it, take me to the high-res version. We're going to be putting this in a nice JavaScript viewer, so don't worry about this like showing up kind of just floating there in space. We'll fix that later. But for now, we just want to make sure that's working. I'm going to copy this a few times. I have 12 of these. I'm going to hit Command C and paste it. 1, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's 12 total times, and we will replace all this stuff later. If I preview it right now, just hitting Command R to preview, now we can see we've got all these images here. So we've got our content. Let's kind of surprised it's working since we haven't closed our div tags yet, but let's go ahead and add a closing div and another closing div. So now these should close this gallery and also close my content div. And finally, let's add our footer. So let's do our little comment here, tell us what it is. Footer, -- right angle bracket, and then under that, we'll put in another div tag, div id equals footer. What am I doing? I'm just getting all lost all over the place here. Let's add a little paragraph tag. So P for paragraphs. And I'm just going to put in like a copyright notice here. Now, typically you would type in Option G to get the copyright symbol. But if I do that here, it's going to display weird. It's going to add this little A next to it. And we need to instead use the correct code for this. And I will admit I forgot what the correct code for the copyright tag is. So see if I can search for it. Learning on the fly here. There we go. So and copy. Let's see if and copy will work. So instead of putting in that, we'll put in ampersand copy. Copy, you're right. Teen me. And then I'm going to put a line break. And then under that, I'll put the URL. So we'll say this is just http colon. Let's put in fake URL.com. So fake URL.com. Close up that p tag. Paragraph tag. We'll close up that paragraph tag. And then we'll close up that div tag. Let's see if that works. I don't know if it's highlighting it in red, which seems like a bad sign. Let's see if that works though. So travel photo site. So no, it did show up. All right, and I'm going to test this as well real quick, just to make sure everything is all hunky-dory. I'm going to use the validator. So we're going to go to W3C Validator. I cannot spell at all. I'm just like all over the place on this keyword. It's kind of driving me a little bit nuts. So with this, I'm just going to copy all of this code. We'll go over to validate by direct input, hit Command V, check it. Error. Yep, we found a problem of, so and should be have escaped as and amp. I forgot to put a semicolon, is what it was. So we need to put the semicolon at the end of this. I forgot about that, so we need to escape that with the semicolon. Let's save it. Command A, Command C, go back over here. Command A, Command V. And then check it one more time. So check. And it says we're all good to go. There's no errors. So we are good to go. Now, let's look real quickly at setting up these images. And I'm going to swap these all out. I'm using Photoshop to do this. You can use whatever editor you want. It's not any more complicated than just cropping them down to different sizes. But you do want to identify what sizes you want to use and how you want to set that up before you start messing around with it. We're going to be using this light case plugin, so light case, lightbox, and if we scroll down here, we're going to be using this as a gallery. And essentially what's going to be happening with our images is we can click on these little buttons, or we can swipe through these, and it's going to load them from the right to left. It's going to kind of swipe through like a film strip. For aesthetic purposes, I'm kind of picky, and I want these to all be the same height. So as they swipe in, I'm not looking at, one is really like tall, and then one is really short, and then one is really tall, and one is really short. I want them all to be consistently sized. I also find that because on most screens, particularly wide screens, this being an Apple screen is a little bit taller than normal compared to other kind of wide screen 16:9 formats. I think this is a 16:10 aspect ratio. I find that from top to bottom is a little bit more limited than from left to right. Like we have all this extra space from left to right, but from top to bottom we have fewer pixels, and we also have like little bars to contend with, and we've got maybe the dock at the bottom and like the Windows control bar down there if you're on Linux, and you got the bar at the top. So it's you end up with a lot of stuff kind of kind of cutting into that. So I'm going to be setting these to be a consistent height, and then the width can change to be whatever width it needs for the screen. Our light case plugin is going to take care of sizing that. I just want them to be consistent kind of in height as they go across. So with that in mind, what this times 1000 means is the height, not the width. So this is just times 1000. However, my thumbnails are all going to be exactly the same height and width. They're all going to be 300 by 200. And if I look at this site here, you can see, well, they're all the same image right now, but I want all of these to line up in a nice grid structure like this. If I don't do that, if I set them up so that, just the original photo sizes, and these photos are kind of all over the place. Some are really wide, some like this palm tree here is really tall, and you can just kind of see how this changes. Like some are kind of a 3:2 format, some are like really wide. The Scotland ones, some are really tall. So if I leave them as that aspect ratio, just their native aspect ratio, what's going to happen is that they're not really going to sit next to each other you're going to end up with all these weird spaces, and you're not going to have that nice ordered, structured grid. So we're going to make sure that all of our thumbnails are 300 by 200. If you're thinking about something like the Pinterest homepage where they all sit next to each other nicely, there's a lot of like extra code that's going on there that's more advanced than what we're going to get into to size them and then maybe automatically make thumbnails of smaller or of larger pictures and stuff like that. We're doing this manually, so we're going to just try to keep it consistent with our crop sizes. So I'm going to open Photoshop, and I'm going to be using my artboards to do this. So in the newer version of Photoshop, they have artboards, so we can kind of set this up like that. You can also just use the crop tool and save out different sizes if you want. That may be a little bit more straightforward. I'm kind of on the fence at this point if the artboards really help with that or not, but you can just do the crop tool if you want. I'm going to use this palm tree as an example because it is so tall. So I'm going to take the original palm tree. I've already got these set up, but I'll take the original palm tree and just kind of run through this process with you. And so right off the bat, this is different than all the other images. I have no other images that are kind of a portrait format like this, so this is the only one. I'm going to duplicate this background a couple of times. So I'm going to hit Command J to duplicate and then just hide the original background layer. Now, this first one, I want to set that to be 1,000 pixels. So we're going to do 1,000 px. And mine is already set to pixels. If it's telling you IN, you either need to make sure to specify px and actually type that out, or you need to go to your Photoshop preferences and units and rulers and change your units from inches to pixels. But for now, for mine, I already have it set to pixels. So when I hit that, you can see how much smaller that becomes than the original image. The original image is massive. This is really nice, high-res, like 7,000 pixel tall image. And we're going to make it this little tiny thing. If I set this to 100% though, and then hit spacebar and drag back up here, it's still a decent size. And I'm looking at this on a 4K display, so it's not taking up a huge amount of space on that 4K display, but it's still visible enough. If you're doing stuff for 4K displays, you probably want to make them a little bit bigger than this, just for the sake of speed and for time. I'm going to set these to 1,000, assuming that most people could be looking at it on an HD display for now. If you are planning to make it for a 4K display, make sure that you have larger versions than this to fit 4K displays. I'd recommend at least like 2,000 pixels tall, just to have that. You can, using media queries, specify which images you use for different resolutions. You can like swap out images if you put your images in as a background and a div tag instead, but that gets a little bit more complicated in setup. So we're going to do this more simply. Again, beginner stuff. I'm going to right click this, create an artboard from the layer. And we'll call this, what is my naming? Just so that I'm consistent with this stuff. So the naming that I've used before is palm-tree x 1000. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. Whatever name you specify for the artboard, that's going to be what it names the file as when it exports it. So we're going to call this palm-tree, and I'm doing these caps because the other names were caps as well. So we're just sticking to consistency. x 1000. So save that. So click OK. And I'm going to make another copy of this. Right click. Right click and just hit Command J to duplicate that. Let's make it visible. And then this one I'm going to set to 300 by 200. Now, if I set it by height right here, I can start with 200. See what happens there. Oh, that's my properties for the. It's not going to give me the right width. So we have like 133 pixels for the width, so that's not going to work. If I set this to 300, then this is going to be giving me a really tall height. I'm going to go ahead and set the width to 300 since that's my largest dimension for the thumbnail. And then I'm going to have to crop this in when I put it on an artboard. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and then artboard from layers. We'll call this palm-tree. I should have copied and pasted this before, and then we'll call it 300x 200. All right, we'll click OK. And actually, you know what? I probably should have moved this off out of the way before I did this, but I didn't, and now it's just kind of a pain in the ass. The artboards in Photoshop are still not as well thought out as the artboards in Illustrator. I should have just, let's take this back a couple of steps. I'm just going to move this out of the way first, and then we'll make an artboard. So right click, artboard from layers, and do dash tree 300 x 200. All right, so palm tree 300 by 200, and then click OK. And then we'll set this artboard size to be the correct size. So right now the height is way too tall. I'm going to hit Command 0, but I'm just going to scale these down until my artboard is about 300 pixels tall. I'm going to lose a lot of this image though. So let's set it to 300. I'm sorry, this actually needs to be 200, so we're going to lose even more of this. So we're going to set this to 200 right there. And then I need to take my layer and kind of move it around in here until I find what I want to keep. Do I want to keep the palm tree and the sun? Do I want to keep the boat and the sun? We kind of have to pick what we want to keep. I'm going to, since the boat is kind of the subject, I'm going to try to keep that. We might even crop out the palm tree entirely, but yeah, I'll try to keep the boat, I guess. There. So now, hit Command 0, we can jump out and see everything. And now I've got these two artboards. If I were doing additional resolutions, I would save these out for even more resolutions, but for now we'll just stick with our thumbnail and our full resolution version. I'm going to go to File, Export, Export As. This will let us export each of these artboards at the same time. So we'll do both artboards at the same time. And I'm just going to select both of them and start off with a quality of like 50% or thereabouts. Typically, the quality change between 50 to 100 really isn't that much. You really don't see that much, and even at 100%, I am not seeing a huge difference between 50 and 100. On our thumbnail version, that might be quite a bit. So if like at 100% on this 4K screen, it's looking pretty garbage. So I might boost that up, especially since it's only like 16K right now. That's not huge. For photographer site, it's probably better to have high-res photos and make people wait a little bit to get them than it is to optimize everything and just compress it down to nothing. But you don't want to make people load unnecessarily large files either, especially if they're like on their phone and they're browsing your portfolio on their phone and using it their LTE connection, their data cap. If you take this down to 0, you can see it starts to look a little bit wonky, but let's leave it around 50-ish, something like that. As long as it looks good, and I can probably zoom in here and see a little bit better what it might look like on an HD display. We still have quite a bit of detail here, so that's fine. Once we've kind of tweaked these to where we're happy with them, I'm going to select them. Actually, I don't think that's even necessary, but we'll just click Export All. And I'm going to export these straight into the Images folder. It'll think about it. This happened pretty quickly, so it's just going to replace those that I've got already. And then I'm going to save this out as a PSD file for later to my Assets folder. So remember, last video we created an Assets folder outside of our root directories that we're going to upload to the site. So I'm going to go to Save As, and we'll go up out of this travel site 2 all the way up to the travel this kind of outside folder. So here's my live site. All this stuff in here is going to be what I put online, but I have this assets folder where I can save things that I'm going to be working on, but not necessarily need to put online. So if I make edits, I have all my different crops here, I can save that stuff here and just have it as a backup ready to go for later. So I'll save this in here, but I don't need to worry about, oh, and I already have a different version in here with more crops, so I'm not going to replace it. But that way I've got everything just ready to go. It's in the assets folder, and I don't need to worry about accidentally uploading it and giving people access to all my really nice, high quality photos. So let's go ahead and quit out of Photoshop, and Q. I'm not going to save it because, again, I already saved it before. And then we can just use Find Replace to swap out these names. So I've got Bagan here. I'm going to hit Command Option F. This will be a little bit different depending on which editor you're using, but if you're using Atom, like I'm using right now, it's Command Option F to open Find Replace. And really, let's sort this by list so I can see the names of these. I'm just going to go through and search for Bagan, exactly this string, Command C, Command V. And I'm going to start on the second line. Obviously, I want to keep the first one as is, so we won't change that one. We'll start on the second line, and I'm just going to type in what I want to replace it with, which in this case is going to be bled. Bled, so we will find, and then I hit replace, replace, replace. And so that is going to replace the the high resolution image, the alternate text, and then also the SRC. If I save this, swipe over, hit Command R to refresh it, we can see it's replaced that image for us with a nice high-res version. And both of those should now also be linking to the correct things. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of these, and then we'll continue with the fonts. So let's go ahead and finish all these. Next one is bus, and we'll hit replace, replace, replace. That's actually Option Command E is the shortcut for that, which I did not know. And then the next one is girl. If we spell it right, girl, Option Command E, E, E. The next one is ladybug. Option Command E, E, E. And then Maldives. Option Command E. And then the next one is mosque. And then next one is palm tree. The next one is scenery. The next one is Scotland. And then sunrise. And then last one is Ulsan. So there, just like that, we changed all of these. Let's go ahead and test these out. So I'm going to save it and then Command R. And we've got all of these images in here very quickly. This looks terrible, so I'll have to fix that. Because when I cropped this in, I screwed something up and made it smaller than it should be. So I'll have to fix that one. But otherwise, these should all work. And we will go through and test each one. That's important to make sure that everything is linking to the correct file too. So that one should be linking here. This nice palm tree, and it is. All right. This one here. All right, good. We are good to go. So now let's go ahead and add our fonts, and then we'll start looking at CSS in the next video. So fonts. Now fonts need to be done a little bit in HTML, so we'll go ahead and talk about those now, since they are kind of a structural part of this. We will need to add some links up here in the head to get them to work. With fonts, there are like 15 web-safe fonts, and that's not really enough. The web-safe fonts that we have just been used way too much. So there are things like Arial and Comic Sans, so fonts that you just kind of blah. We want to use better fonts than that, but the problem is that if we download fonts off of like DA font or Font Squirrel or something like that, it's only going to be installed on our systems. The system needs to have that font installed in order to render text with it. And if you download a font from DA font, for instance, I can pretty much guarantee that only like 0.003% of the people in the world will have that font as well. And even worse, a lot of times those fonts aren't going to support other languages and things like that. So it really, it's not going to show up on anybody's computer except yours and those 0.3003% of people who have that font too. And what they're going to see is just going to be whatever web-safe fonts their browser decides to fill in for it. So instead of either being limited to these horrible website fonts or using fonts that we don't know if anybody else has, we're going to use web-hosted fonts. And that's where Google Fonts comes in. Actually, let's get rid of some of these. I already added some earlier, but we'll go through the whole process of adding these. Google Fonts is a great place to start. They've got a pretty good selection of fonts. And the nice thing about it is that it's free and it's open, so you can use it anytime. You don't have to worry about licensing and things like that. There are other options too. So if you're subscribed to Adobe CC, you can use the Typekit fonts. Those fonts a lot of times are very nicely polished and are very solid fonts, but the licensing issues that you run into with using the Typekit fonts can make it a little bit less stable. I have run into some issues with, if your CC subscription lapses, then your fonts will stop working, or if you put in the wrong URL, then it won't work. So they have to work for a certain URL. And if you move your site to a different domain or different host, then it might stop working. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong, and then you have to then go back to Typekit and sort it out. You don't have to deal with that with Google Fonts. So I would suggest starting with Google Fonts. And if you have like a specific font that you want from Typekit or from somewhere else, then go on to use those. But if you're not really sure what you want, start with Google Fonts, because these are pretty easy to use, easy to set up, and stable, which is important. So I already have some selected that I'm going to be using for this, one of which is probably getting to the point of being overused already. You've probably seen it somewhere else, but Amotic. And Amotic is kind of a hand-drawn looking font, but it's really tall and condensed. There's Amotica, or Amotica, has a little more space between the letters, but I'm going to use Amotic SC. So I'm going to add that to my basket down here. So we've got Amotic SC, and then I'm also going to use Railway, or whatever it's called. Railway. And I'm going to use the regular one. So I'm using two fonts. And I would always suggest using at least two. Get a nice, interesting header font, something that's going to call attention and also really capture the feel that you're going for in the site, but not necessarily good for text, like paragraphs of text. For instance, Amotic looks really, really nice, and it's great for headlines. That kind of like hand-drawn font is a little fun, it's a little quirky, but I don't want to read a paragraph in Amotic. There's no way that I'm going to sit down and read a whole paragraph written in all caps in Amotic, and it's like all shouting at me with this quirky hand-drawn kind of feel. That sounds terrible. So for paragraphs and for larger blocks of text, and really most of the site, you want to use something that's easier to read, that still maybe captures the feel that you're going for, but is first and foremost easy to read and functional. So that's where Railway comes in. If you go for more fonts than that, then it's going to start to slow down your load times. So I wouldn't go more than 3 if you can avoid it, unless you're doing something creative or something specifically with fonts. But for something like this, stick with just a couple or 3. And this will show you when we go into our basket here. So I've got the 2 that I want. It'll show you what our load time is. With these 2, it's giving us load time fast. But we also need to add different fonts from the font family. So in this case, we're only doing regular. If I want italic, if I want bold, if I want additional languages, I'm going to have to sync all those. And that's going to slow down our load time. So here, I'll keep regular. I'm going to add also a bold and also an italic. And even with just the bold, now our load time is moderate. If you're in the yellow, that's probably fine, but as long as you're there, you should be fine. If you get into the red, then you might want to test it and see. And if it loads really slow, then you'll have to dump some fonts later. But I'm just going to keep this simple. Have a couple of versions of Railway and just the basic Amotic SC. We're going to go back to embed. And once you've got your font family set up here, there's a couple of bits of code that you're going to need to paste into your site. One is going to go in the header to link to Google, and then the other bits are going to go into our CSS file. So this first one, hit Command-C, go back over to my HTML file, and right under title here, let's go ahead and put in a comment to tell future me what this is. Put this, so Google Fonts link, -- right angle bracket, and then under that, I'm just going to paste that link. for whatever reason, the W3 Schools Validator, the W3C Validator does not like Google's syntax here. Don't worry about it. It still works. But when I take this to Validator right now, it's going to call me out on this particular line for a couple of things. Just don't worry about it. It's fine. It will still work. I am pretty sure. All right, so we've added this, we've linked it, but now we need to go into our CSS. I'm going to save this, go into my style sheet.css here, and add that CSS for the font family, and telling it to use font family, because even though I've linked it right now, it's not going to bring those fonts in. So bring that in, still using that, I think, Times New Roman or whatever that is. So just like my index.html file, I'm going to keep this organized, and I'm going to comment things up. There are different people who give you different best practices. Some say it should be organized alphabetically. Some say it should be categorized. It just depends on who you're working with, really, and what works for you. I think for the most part, as long as it's functional and everything works, then you kind of organize it in a way that suits you. It does make a difference sometimes of what order things come in, both in CSS and in HTML. But we're going to keep this organized by section from top to bottom. So I'm going to do first things that are kind of controlling everything in the page. So we're going to start with a body tag. Body. And I'm typing HTML right now. We're going to need to do a body selector in CSS. The way CSS works is that you use a selector to tell it what you want to affect, and then in curly brackets, you give it some attributes that you want to apply to that. I'm going to also give this a comment to tell me what these are doing. So in CSS, comments look more like this /**, and then whatever text you want to put in there. So we'll call this, let's call this high level or top level. Change everything. So we'll do */. So body is going to change everything in the site, and I'm just going to put in that font family Rallyway, the readable, nice readable font. We're going to apply that to everything. So any text I put in here will just default to Rallyway. The way this is set up right now, if it can't find Rallyway or Google servers are down or whatever the case may be, it's just going to go for whatever sans serif it can find. I want to give it a little bit more control than that, so I'm going to specify Helvetica first. If we can't find that, then we will do Arial. And then if we can't find that, we'll do sans serif. Next, I want to tell all of my, let's go ahead and give that a little line break there. I want to tell all of my headers to use that nice Amatic SC font. So I'm going to specify for H1, comma, and I'm separating these by comma to say that I want to select them all individually. So H1, H2, comma, H3, comma, H4, comma, H5, comma, and H6. Make sure you don't put a comma after H6. The commas tell us that we want to select all of these, like H1 and all the H2s and all the H3s and all the H4s. If we didn't put the comma in, it would say any H2 tag inside of an H1 tag, or it would essentially do with this whole thing if it had no commas. Would be like, it would look specifically for an H1 or H6 tag inside an H5 tag, inside an H4 tag, inside an H3 tag, and so on and so forth. We're not ever going to have that situation, so we're just going to paste this in here. We're going to use commas to separate it out so it gets everything. So font family, Amatic SC, and then this goes to cursive, which I guess makes sense because it's kind of a handwritten font, but if we leave it set to cursive and it can't find Amatic SC, what it's going to do is put Comic Sans all over your site, which we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific here, and if it can't find Amatic, then we're going to go for Rallyway, and oops, I just pasted instead of copying. And if it can't find that, then we're going to go for Helvetica, Arial, and then sans serif. So we'll just keep all of our fonts consistent at that point. So after that, we'll do Helvetica, Arial, and sans serif. So hopefully our fonts no matter what, it should look nice and consistent throughout. So I'm going to save my style sheet, save my index.html. Hopefully this works. I'm going to go over and test it. Hopefully I didn't bork things up. Nope, I borked things up. Something somewhere is not working. So what is not working? Body tag is working. I put my semicolons in. So I can inspect this here. And we are not, for the body tag, we are not finding that CSS. If I go to style editor, I'm not finding that CSS style sheet anywhere. And it looks like I forgot to link in my style sheet. So that's going to be a problem. If we don't have our style sheet linked, obviously it's not going to apply our styles for us. We created them, but I didn't link them together. So what I need to do is tell this HTML file to look in my CSS for the style sheet. So and we'll do this before the Google Fonts link. I should have done this earlier, but I didn't. So we'll add a link. We need to add a couple of attributes here that are a little bit obscure. We'll add a rel attribute. Rel equals, and in quotes we will say style. So rel style sheet, and after that we will put type, and that's text CSS. I could just hit enter. My key hinting is working here, and then after that I'm going to put the href that will link to that style sheet. So we'll put href css / sheet style sheet dot css, and then let's go ahead and end that link tags and save it. And now let's see if it works. Now it applied all my fonts, and then in the next video when we go to apply CSS, it'll start to apply that for us as it's supposed to. Well, I hope that has been informative. Come back and see us for the next video where we start to style this and make it look like the nice site that we saw in the first video. And then after that, we'll go ahead and start making the other pages or just kind of cloning this out to the other 2 pages. And I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Bye, guys.